Before we dive into everything, thought we'd do some quick introductions. My name is Ling Yamasaki. I'm the Director of Education at JANM. And then my colleagues.
Hi there, I'm Sohela Pagano. I'm the Education Specialist working alongside Lynn.
And I'm Nina Nakao. I'm the Education Assistant.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get into my screen share mode here, and we'll get started with, okay, so this is our main education resources web section of our website. It's under our education tab. And this is what we're going to be walking you through today. We're going to do a brief overview, and if you have any desire to refer, you can always come back to this page for that. To start off with, we always will have, well, currently we have our featured resource, which is our printable guide for a film called The Masters of Modern Design. And this is a film that our Watasa Media Arts Center co-produced with KCET and PBS, and it takes a look at some designers, including architects and weavers, who were influenced by their incarceration experience, but also, separately really accomplished artists on their own. And this film is going to be, it's available to view on the website. It's also been streaming on PBS here in Southern California, I know for sure. And then we're going to be having a Q&A session with the children of all of these artists coming up as one of our live programs. So please check our website for that information. But to accompany all that, we created an activity guide. And so it has various things for kids of all ages to do from home. And so that's this week's featured resource. So every week you'll see something new there at the top of that page. And that's both online, offline activities, including our next section, which is our activity section, that has various content that we've been putting up during our closure. So we have some films, including our origami crane, created for our Under a Mushroom Cloud exhibition, which was on view shortly before, was on view when we closed. So it's a way to keep that going. We also have created origami activities, a tutorial activity, so that you can make the origami pieces that we make with our students, our school kids, when they come to visit us. This is what we make with them. So those are available to view and learn from as well. I'm going kind of quickly, I apologize, but we're short on time. So please come back and view all those. And then in the next section, we have our web resources and lessons. And these are, the first two are NPS-funded kind of microsites that we've created from our collection. The first one I want to introduce you to is the one called Enemy Mail. And that is, I'm gonna move this up here. This is the homepage of the Enemy Mail site. This takes a look at one family's experience. So we hear a lot about the Japanese American experience, but of course there are thousands of experiences, each of them different. This is a story of a gentleman named Gihachi Yamashita. He was taken from his family's home the day after Pearl Harbor. They did not know where he was located, and he was transferred to various Department of Justice camps. And this website traces not only his journey, but also that of his family. He had two young daughters who were aged 11 and 13 when he was detained. And it gives a personal kind of look at the Japanese American World War II experience. So the way that this website is organized is we have some history on the family. And then when you go down to the bottom here, you can move on to the next part of his story. And then from there, you're able to look at various stories. I have the pull-down menu showing there that divide his life into various kind of themes of his life. And we've incorporated his collection, the Gihachi Yamashita collection, in our in JANM's collection is a really rich one. It has, you know, diaries, it has artifacts, it has journals, letters. So all of that was incorporated and used to create this website. One in particular that I pulled to show you all this evening is the petition authorities. Part of his story. One, because I think, gives a sense of kind of what families were dealing with at this time. So as you can see, we have some excerpts from letters that he sent to his family, his wife and 2 daughters, asking them to, you know, to show support for the United States, despite the fact that he's detained in jail. And we've also some photographs from our collection that illustrate this family. This to me is really impactful. I know many of you are educators, so you work with young students all the time. This is a letter to Lillian, who was 13 at the time of her father's, when he was taken from the family. And, you know, here she is writing to the director of the Department of Justice as a 13-year-old, but being, you know, the English speaker of the family and the older sister. She had that response. I'm sorry, this is a letter that she wrote to him down here, asking kind of what the status is of her father. And then this is a letter that she received in return from Edward Ennis, who was at the time director of the Department of Justice. So through these artifacts, through these diary excerpts, we get a really intimate look into this family's situation. The title of the website, Enemy Mail, is pulled from, you know, that's how all of his letters were labeled, because he was considered an enemy. But when you read them, the letters to each other, they're very sweet. They're just letters that a family would write to each other. So kind of gives a human aspect of the incarceration experience. There are also additional resources website under the About section, one of which that I think is pretty useful is our timeline map. So as you go through the different dates, you have a sense of where the family is in relationship to the father, Hihachi. So he was separated from the rest of the family. And as time moves on, you can see that he is transferred quite a few times all over the place. And then they are eventually moved to Aurora, Arkansas. And then eventually there is a family reunification that happens, you know, a few years after he is first separated from the family. So a lot of themes that can be discussed in the classroom. It's also designed for students to use independently. So if you would like to encourage your students to just explore this website and this family's history, they can do that as well. The other web resource we wanted to show you, the microsite was made the previous year. It's called Exploring America's Concentration Camps. And this one takes a look at the incarceration experience rather than chronologically. It takes a look at it thematically. And so we have these 9 themes here that take a look at that. So it's really kind of, I think, best utilized by students that have a framework of Japanese American experience prior to exploring this. So you can explore by theme or else by camp, by location. So if your school is located particularly close to one of these sites, you might want to use that, but it can be explored in both of those ways. One example I wanted to show you was, so in each of these themes, there are 3 artifacts. So one example I'm showing you here is called Carry On Crusaders. It's one of my favorites. It's within the community and culture theme. And as you can see, the website is designed to be interactive in the sense that you can zoom in and read the letter. You can also read transcripts of it if script is a little difficult to see. And we have a lot of questions that encourage careful looking of the artifacts. So it's the next best thing to seeing things in person at JANM. And a lot of these things are things that we don't often get to showcase in person in our galleries because of space limitations. So it's a nice way to showcase them online. And you can read about various pieces from our collection in an inquiry-based way, because we always have questions to accompany the artifacts. So those are those two resources. And then to move on to the next, I'm going to pass it over to Sohaila.
Great, thank you, Lynn. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all now. All right. So we're continuing on here in the web resources and lessons. If we come down here, these last three that we have are all using a platform called the Learning Lab platform, and it's available through the Smithsonian Center for Learning and Digital Access. So these three Learning Lab collections were created by JANM's staff in partnership with the Smithsonian Center for Learning and Digital Access in 2018. We've included them here because they, all three of them are really great resources for either as a digital lesson to work through with your students, and even potentially for your students to do on their own if you're teaching at the high school level. So with all the learning labs, here we're looking at document analysis, civilian exclusion order, and the Japanese American incarceration. With the learning labs, what's really great about them is you can pull resources from multiple websites, from multiple sources. So for instance, in this Learning Lab collection, we're focusing the analysis on one primary document, the civilian exclusion order, and you can attach questions onto those things. So in addition to using, you know, a learning lab that we've produced, you're also, as a teacher, able to copy these learning labs, and if you wanted to add questions or anything like that, you could do that, or you could just use it as is. And so we've built in some questions and things to help guide the analysis here. So with this particular lesson, we start by focusing on one particular document and ask your students to look at euphemistic language, the types of language that's being used in this document, and are they using certain words instead of other words? And we do talk about this a lot in our galleries as well when we have students on site. And then to further contextualize this activity, that's what we have here under the additional resources. So we have photographs from JANM's collections. We have a couple of blog posts that were written by JANM staff. Here we have pages from Executive Order 9066 to further contextualize. So it's great, it's sort of all in one bundle for your students to be able to access. And then, as I mentioned, you could copy it and modify it in any way you want. So that's the first one, focusing on the civilian exclusion order. The next one we go to, documenting history, photography, and the Japanese American incarceration experience. Here we've set up an activity that analyzes photographs. One, a pretty famous photograph taken by Clem Albers as part of the War Relocation Authority. He was hired to document the process of removal along with Dorothea Lange, as I'm sure many of you know. In this lesson, we ask students to analyze that particular photo, and then this other photo that is part of the JANM collection that was taken while incarcerated, by an incarceree while incarcerated, of he and his friends. The purpose of this is to sort of analyze the stories that are being told, looking at the reasons why the photograph was being taken, and sort of are there any surprises that we find in terms of the content that's being conveyed. For instance, you know, why are these three young gentlemen smiling when they're in this barren landscape? So that's something that you can talk through with your students. And so here again is the questions for analyzing those two together. And just like the previous one, there's additional resources to help contextualize, including more blog posts, The National Archives, you can go through there, more photographs from the National Archives as well. So further photographic evidence to sort of contextualize this, looking at how photographs help us understand history. And then the last lesson plan through Learning Lab is Japanese American incarceration, a focus on, quote, assembly centers. So one of sort of the gaps that we found in knowledge that students often have when they come to see us on site is they're not always aware that many Japanese Americans were taken to temporary detention centers, places like Santa Anita racetracks, before then going on to the more permanent concentration camps. So this collection focuses on that experience of those quote, assembly centers. So again, you can see we have Public Proclamation number 29, one of the civilian exclusion orders. And then this collection is really great because it highlights a lot of the artwork that is in JANM's collection. Work by Estelle Ishigo, Mina Okubo, artwork that was created by people experiencing this incarceration of their time in the assembly centers, in the temporary detention centers. And then also, again, this has an activity embedded with it as well to look at certain 3 different sources and then analyze how they're presenting the concept of a temporary detention center or an assembly center. So these 3, if you continue to explore the Smithsonian Learning Lab, you're going to find even more. It's kind of a rabbit hole, so definitely encourage you to do that. But if you're looking specifically for teaching the Japanese American experience, these are 3 that we've created that are a great place to start. And what's great is these are all meant and designed digitally, so students can interact with them through the digital classroom. So moving on, if you want more printable things that aren't as wedded to the digital space, we also have that for you. So in this section, Printable Curriculum, we have 3 things right now. The first is They Called Us Enemy, a teacher's guide for the graphic novel co-written by George Takei called They Called Us Enemy. And so JANM was really honored to be asked to create this teacher's guide, which includes a series of activities, lesson plans, discussion prompts to accompany the book. So the book can be purchased anywhere, that you purchase books, including the JANM store. But the teacher's guide is free to download always from our website. So we have an some introductory text to help situate the graphic novel itself, which is really designed for middle and high school students, but can be extended for elementary and university level. And as I mentioned, there's lesson plans, there's discussion prompts, there's worksheets. And one of the lessons I wanted to highlight was we have lesson number 4, which is exploring multiple perspectives. With this particular text, one of the great things about it is that George is telling his story from his perspective as a child, experiencing the forced removal. And so with this particular lesson, you're looking at, we ask students to look at the experience of removal, especially the train, the experience of riding the train from Santa Anita to Rohr concentration camp, what that experience was like for George as he describes it in the graphic novel, and then how he reflects how that experience would have been for his parents, who he talks about having a much different experience. He as a child having a lot of fun and his parents making it a game for him, but really not quite contemplating or understanding the fear that his parents must have felt during that time. And so asking students to compare and contrast those 2 different things. So that's just one lesson, but again, these lessons are designed for specific parts throughout the whole text, and it is a really great way to learn about that story the incarceration story through the lens of one particular individual. The next, second to last one I'm going to talk about is our instructions to all persons, reflections on Executive Order 9066. These were a series of lesson plans created in 2017 to accompany the exhibition at JANM for the 75th anniversary of Executive Order 9066. So in this lesson plan, or in this curriculum, we've got six different lessons that you can see here. And one of the lessons is one that I've already sort of talked to you guys about, is the document analysis. So if you were looking for a more printer-friendly version of that lesson, where you have students look at the civilian exclusion order and analyze it for euphemistic language, this would be a great option for that. So again, in this curriculum, you'll be looking at lots of those primary documents surrounding and the context of the signing of Executive Order 9066. Okay, and hurrying along here as we're running short on time, the last resource that I want to talk about is our Fighting for Democracy, an Educator Resource Guide. So for those of you who are with us today who have been able to bring your students to JANM, some of you might have brought your students to our Fighting for Democracy exhibition. And along with that experience that we have on site, there is a whole curriculum created that looks at what democracy means, who is the we in We the People, and it's really centering on activating youth dialogue and challenging conventional assumptions of democracy. So there's, again, several lesson plans in here looking at democracy, and then also looking at the stories of specific individuals. So if you're interested in that content that you would be getting if you came on site with your students, that is starting at lesson number 5. All the information about, those 7 individuals that you would learn about from different backgrounds, sort of expanding that story of how during that time of World War II, democracy was really, really failing minorities, not just Japanese Americans, in addition to Japanese Americans. It sort of expands that story. All that information is here. So there's document cards and things like that with the primary source documentation for you to look at with your students as well. Okay, and so I'm going to keep my screen shared, but I'm going to turn off my video if I can do that, because Nina is going to get started.
Okay. All right, so just to wrap us up, I wanted to take you to the last part of our education resources website. So as we keep scrolling down to Connect Live, so this isn't necessarily a new program. It's something we've been doing for a while, and because we really want to make sure that JANM is a national museum and that we can reach as many students as we can. So our virtual guest speakers program, which is for this 8th to 12th grade, late middle school, high school level, is just what it sounds like. It's us bringing our amazing volunteer group and all of the incredibly knowledgeable people in the JANM community to your classroom. So we are evolving this program rapidly as all of the teachers and educators around the world are building all these skills and curriculum for distance learning. But it consists of just having some pre-visit discussion with the class. We want to know what you've read about the Japanese American experience, what you're interested in, and what you might want to talk about. And then we'll set up a call with one of our JANM representatives. So usually that's one of our volunteers, and we're so proud and thankful of our amazing volunteers who are learning Zoom, and they are also incredibly eager to talk to as many students as they can. It's their favorite thing in the world, and they want to continue doing that. So this is definitely our most adaptable program that we have right now. So if you feel like you might need something specific, I saw one question in the chat that was talking about resources written in Japanese. We don't have educational materials on this page of our website that are written in Japanese, but we do have Japanese speaking volunteers. So if that might be one of the best ways to connect with a Japanese speaking student audience right now, as the museum continues to stay closed for now. But like things like that, we're really looking to work with you one-on-one to make sure that this experience is what you and your students are looking for. And then just to wrap it up, as we keep scrolling down to the bottom of the page, we have just a general resources tab, and this is also what it sounds like. So we know that many of our great teachers already have curriculum that talks about the Japanese American experience using novels or movies. And so this is a really great starting out place to kind of supplement if you have existing lesson plans. So we have a timesheet, a timeline and vocabulary list that might look familiar if you've brought your students to JANM. It's our pre-visit resource developed in 2019. But we also have a map, bibliography, terminology, and fact sheets as well. Some of them are PDFs that are easy to print out, and then others are built into our website, and then others are part of the Discover Nikkei website, which is also part of JANM. So with that, I'm gonna open it back up so you can see everybody's face. And did we have any questions? Okay, so there's a question. There's a really nice comment from Pat Ishida. Hi, Pat.
So yeah, so as Nina mentioned, we do have our Japanese speaking volunteers. I also posted a link to our website called Discover Nikkei, which is a great resource. It's not specifically for students, but it can be used for students. Of course, it has a lot of oral histories on there as well as other content. And that is not only in Japanese, it's also in English, Spanish, and Portuguese as well. So that is available for everyone to take a view at, to view as well.
Oh, okay. If we missed the beginning of this panel presentation, will it be available for viewing? Yes, it will. It will be on the JANM YouTube, which is janm.org, spelled out. So JANM.org. Soon.
Great. Yes, and that's also, as I mentioned earlier, something that you can share with your colleagues. And we're continuing to learn how to function digitally. We know that you may not know what you all will be needing in the coming year. Right now, we don't know what we need right now. We don't know what we can provide. But in all the uncertainty and all of the there's a lot of change going on right now. One thing that we want to make sure you understand is that the part that hasn't changed is JANM's mission, is our department's priorities, and we really are committed to learning, and we look forward to new and creative ways that we can work with you all. I see we have another question about virtual guest speaker program available, and currently it is at no cost. We'll do our best to keep that as long as we can, but we can't promise that it'll always be no cost, but we do hope that we can continue to support as best that we can. We can also, if you come up with something that you thought of after our program today, you can always reach out to us at groupvisits@janm.org. So I will put that in the chat right now. And if a week from now you're like, hey, I could really use XYZ, reach out to us. We'll see what we can do. Like I said, we all are in a period where we're just kind of thinking about how we can best be there for each other. And teachers inspire us daily. We really are so grateful to the work that you all do, especially right now under such challenging circumstances. So with that, I think we're just about through. If there's any other content, questions, let us know. And so Haley, you have a...
The last
shout out
thing
for a survey.
the last thing I put in the chat, and you will be receiving an email from us with the link as well. But if you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of feedback on the resources that you learned a little bit about today, we're interested in, as Lynn said, helping in the best way that we can. So if you could tell us a little bit about what seems really exciting to you right now, that would be really helpful for us moving forward.
We have one last question from a JANM teacher. So she asked, when are you taking reservations yet for school field trips? And do you have any idea when you will be?
Okay.
So we're, sorry, we usually open up in July, but this year's a little different. So we're actually not going to be taking any reservations for the remainder of the calendar year. However, we are, we'll be opening our calendar up in July, as always, for trips beginning in January, with the little caveat that they'll have to kind of be tentative, because we don't know if we will, you know, we're working on steps, of course, to safely reopen. And so safety is our #1 priority. So we can take reservations for trips to happen anytime after January 1st, but we'll just be in close contact with all of those teachers as to whether or not those can still happen from either your district's perspective or JANM's perspective. Okay.
Perfect.
So thank you all again for joining us live for our program. You know, as a reminder, we are putting out content weekly. We have 2 more live programs coming up this week. On Thursday, we have a program that will be moderated by our Chief Curator, Karen Ishizuka, and that will be on anti-Asian racism, past and present. And then on Friday, we have a Q&A session with the children of those designers that I mentioned that are featured in the Masters of Modern Design documentary. And info on both of those programs, as well as upcoming, can be seen on our website. So thank you all.
Thank you
For joining us, and reach out if you have any questions.
Bye.